Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. One of the greatest pleasures of being here at Columbia Journalism School for me is the chance to ask questions of Pulitzer Prize winners and to celebrate the great reporting that they have done. Those of you who want to tweet tonight's events, that's our hashtag, and those are the Twitter handles of all our panelists. And before we begin, a word from our sponsor. The Columbia Journalism School is now open for admissions. One of our admissions staff is at the back. Her name is Taryn Almanzar. You can speak to her personally, or you can call or email us. Let me start with the first story, Chris Hamby's story. It's a series of stories called Restless and Burdened. I will give a few minutes to introduce the story and then ask questions of Chris. In some forgotten parts of the country, men and women still live and die for coal. Hidden away in the Appalachians, they spend lifetimes underground in the coal mines where they inhale the coal dust that blackens their lungs and chokes off their breath. In 1969, in reaction to the deaths of thousands of coal miners from black lung disease, Congress passed the Coal Act, which imposed health and safety standards in coal mines. It also compensated miners stricken by black lung, which is caused by the inhalation of coal dust. Since the 1990s, there has been a revival of the disease. Some 85,000 US coal miners face new dangers posed by the increasingly toxic mixture of dust generated by advanced machines that rapidly chew through coal and rock. For an average wage of just $25 an hour, they risk explosions, rock falls, fires, and disease. Today, more than 6% of miners in central Appalachia are afflicted with black lung. When Chris Hamby, a reporter for the nonprofit Center for Public Integrity, began researching black lung, he was surprised to find that only a small number of coal workers stricken with the disease win compensation from the Labor Department. He also found that coal companies appeal almost every award. But there was more. Hamby obtained hundreds of thousands of previously confidential documents from the courts and other places. He created the first ever database of doctors' opinions. He also traversed the hills of Appalachia, visiting clinics and sitting with miners in their homes as they gasped for breath or inhaled oxygen from a tank. Investigative journalism is about finding patterns of wrongdoing, and this is what Chris found. Eminent lawyers and doctors working for the coal industry resorted to the most clever and underhanded tactics to deny sick and dying miners meager benefits and affordable care. He found that the industry's favorite law firm for dealing with coal miners' claims withheld medical evidence that would have worked in the miners' favor. He also found that within the Johns Hopkins Medical Institution was a little-known unit of doctors who have long been the coal industry's favorite experts. These doctors consistently provided opinions crucial to defeating the miners' claims, even though the doctors' methods were unsound and their conclusions were wrong. Hamby found miners like Stephen Day, shown here in the picture, who worked in an underground coal mine in West Virginia for 35 years. He gasped for air, slept upright in a recliner, and inhaled oxygen from a tank 24 hours a day. Doctors he consulted agreed he had black lung, yet Steve's longtime employer fought vigorously to avoid paying him. As a result, he and his family were barely scraping by, sometimes resorting to loans from relatives or neighbors to make it through. The impact of this story was immediate and dramatic. 2 days after publication, Johns Hopkins suspended its black lung program, pending a review. US senators began crafting laws to reform the benefit system, and Congress urged the Labor Department to investigate its own claims system. Chris Hamby, congratulations for winning the Pulitzer Prize for Investigative Reporting.
Thank you.
Chris, tell us how you found this story.
Well, I'd done quite a bit of reporting previously on environment, public health, and labor issues, and I came across this in the wake of the Upper Big Branch mine disaster that occurred in 2010. 29 men were killed in southern West Virginia in an explosion there. There was a report from the governor's task force that one page in this, I believe, 130-page or so report mentioned, sort of as an aside, that they had performed autopsies on 24 of the miners who were killed in this accident, and 17 of them had black lung. That is a shocking number, and that led me to look at why that was happening. And why government researchers were finding that there was this resurgence in the disease that was supposed to have been virtually eradicated years ago, decades ago. And as I was reporting in the coal fields, I kept hearing all about the benefit system and doctors and lawyers who were involved, and it was somewhat intimidating to try and tackle that. And I sort of resisted it initially, but eventually the stories of these men and their families pulled me into it. I just got to a point where I couldn't ignore the compelling human drama of it, and so I started looking at the doctors and the lawyers involved.
Why the doctors and the lawyers?
Well, I got pulled into this initially because, you know, as an investigative reporter, it's very difficult to say, I want to investigate the entire black lung benefit system. I mean, it's unwieldy. There has to be, that's more of a topic, as I like to say, than a story. So, you know, I resisted that sort of topic, but then I came across the case of Gary Fox, who was a coal miner who was wrongfully denied benefits because the preeminent law firm that represents coal companies had withheld crucial evidence that they'd obtained in his case, and he was forced to go back to work for a number of years. He got progressively sicker until he needed a lung transplant and had to retire and filed a new benefits claim, and he died waiting on a lung transplant. Now, I started looking at that and started looking at whether what happened in his case was a pattern. Because as horrific as that would be, you know, what we really want to establish is this a broader issue? And that's when all the use of a lot of previously confidential records came into play. And that's sort of how I started examining the lawyers.
Well, tell us about, you know, you got confidential records, court documents that were not public, as well as doctors' opinions, which, as you know, health information is not public. How did you get hold of these documents?
Right, so pretty much everything in the black lung system is protected by privacy laws, and that is probably as it should be, because there is a lot of private medical and financial information in these records. It's not just like a normal case file in a court. And so in order, now the final decision by the judge is publicly available online. They at least make that much available. But you don't get to see what led up to that, and you don't get to really examine sort of the key filings. And what I needed to do to establish the tactics that the lawyers were using was to actually look at, in great detail, at the specific filings and medical reports and what was withheld and what wasn't withheld in specific cases. And the only way to do that was to get the permission of the people whose cases they were. And so this, it took a while to identify potential cases of interest. And then I, after consulting with a number of people, crafted a very brief form that I asked people if they would be willing to sign, where they would basically fill in their name, social security number, and signature, and allow me to access their full files. And amazingly, almost all of them said yes and gave me access to their files because they felt like they had been grievously wronged by the system that was there to protect them.
And what did the file show?
The files showed a pattern of withholding crucial evidence in claims against minors, and not just withholding evidence, but also leading judges and other lawyers and even their own consulting doctors to rely on evidence that they had very, very good reason to believe was inaccurate and misleading.
The court files actually showed that?
Yes.
And
yes,
can you
see
give an
what's,
example? Yeah.
Yes. So in the case of Gary Fox, for example, it was later disclosed, and these were in the files that I got, that there were 2 reports that they had obtained of, well, for instance, Gary had part of his lung removed because they were afraid that he had cancer, and so they wanted to rule that out. The local pathologist at a hospital who has no particular expertise in black lung and wasn't looking for it found, just made a vague diagnosis and just ruled out cancer. He didn't connect that to black lung, but the law firm obtained slides of his lung tissue without his knowledge, had them read by 2 of their own pathologists who said this is the most severe form of black lung, and then withheld that evidence. And that was actually in the file when I was able to get it.
You also put together a database of doctors' opinions, and I want to show how you put that together. Can you explain this graphic to us? Yeah.
Yes, and that was actually put together by our wonderful graphics person, Chris Zubak-Skis. He brought the mishmash of data that I had in a really messy Excel file into this, which I think pretty clearly conveys Dr. Wheeler's record. Dr. Wheeler is the head of the black lung unit at Johns Hopkins, and so I went through and logged about, let's see, it was more than 3,400 x-rays in 1,500 cases that have been decided since 2000 in which Dr. Wheeler had weighed in. He had never once found the severe form of black lung that would entitle you to automatic compensation, and only occasionally found even the very minimal form, but usually the minors were not able to win based on that. So you can see here, I was also able to compare other doctors' readings of the exact same films that Dr. Wheeler was looking at. So each dot is an x-ray, and the green ones are positive readings, and the red ones are negative readings. And you can see pretty clearly, looking at the same x-rays, doctors saw very, very different things from Dr. Wheeler in many, many cases.
That's fantastic, yeah. Taking on lawyers and doctors is like an invitation to not one lawsuit, but several lawsuits,
yeah.
right? So how did you bulletproof this story? How did you make sure that you would not be sued in court for your findings?
There were some sleepless nights with this one because, I mean, I think probably if I told my editors in advance we're going to take on a major law firm and one of the most prestigious universities in the world, they probably would have said, "You're nuts. Let's stop this." But you know, we have I basically went over and over and over everything, just sort of meticulously logged what I was finding in the court files and reviewed everything that was entered in the spreadsheet multiple times. And then when it actually came time to write the story, that's frequently a big issue, is translating what you've found into language that is compelling for a reader, but also not libelous. And so that was a lot of work, and then there was an extra added difficulty of trying to get the law and the medicine right. And so I would call experts and read them specific passages and say, is this right? We tweak the language a little bit to make sure I'm not mischaracterizing anything or misinterpreting anything I'm saying. And then at the Center for Public Integrity, there's a very detailed fact-checking process where every fact in a story, so multiple facts per sentence usually, would have to be footnoted. So our in-house lawyer, Peter Smith, God bless him, this story was, this project, I would just, every installment, I would hand him something like this. And it was just all the documents that he had to go through, and then there were a lot of electronic documents too, so I felt terrible for him. So we did that, and we also had it reviewed by outside counsel, and so, we felt pretty confident by the time we went to press with it.
And there was no pushback from Johns Hopkins or the law firm?
I was prepared for some pushback, but I was pleasantly surprised that there really wasn't. I was actually quite surprised. Really, the only reaction that we got was 2 days later, Johns Hopkins said, we've suspended this unit.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I want you to ask some questions. While you go up there, I'm going to ask what else has changed since the story's publication.
Sure. So you mentioned the suspension of the program at Johns Hopkins. There has been, Senator Bob Casey and Jay Rockefeller, working with some other senators and George Miller in the House, have put together a bill that would overhaul the black lung benefits system. We'll see what chance that or any legislation has in Congress, but now, there have also been things that the Labor Department has done administratively to try and address this. So they've begun a rulemaking process where they will seek to address the issue of lawyers withholding medical evidence in cases. They've started pilot programs that would allow minors to basically have access to better medical evidence to try and close that gap in the quality of evidence that they're able to present in cases. And then in certain cases, Labor Department lawyers will actually be told to intervene on behalf of minors to make sure that they have at least the solid basis of a case to go forward.
Any questions from our audience? Can you please go to the microphone?
Do you consider yourself a superhero? I mean, it's true.
No, not at all. I think the people I
I'm
write
a
about are.
superhero. If I speak as an old man, homosexual, Latino, and black, I won't be here. I won't get 2 inches from where you can do it. You're actually a superhero for these people. Sanskrit is all, most of them, unfortunately, they're all white. I never heard of a black man having black lung. Thank you.
I promise I did not pay him.
Are you a superhero?
No, but really a lot of the people in these stories are in a lot of ways, and some of the minors and some of their advocates are, frankly, their actions are heroic and self-effacing and pretty remarkable.
Yes, please go in. Yeah.
So you've talked a lot about the documents that you looked at, but you also mentioned the human drama and how you were able to sort of talk to sources and get them to open up to you and give their social security numbers. What was that magic touch that you had? How much time did you spend with them day to day? How did you balance the looking through documents and court filings and actually talking to people and getting to know them at a human level?
Right. There's only so much time you can spend looking at a document or a database without going insane. So it's good to have, to interact with sources to keep you balanced and actually a human being. I think the biggest thing, I was surprised that people agreed to the level of access that they did. I could not have done this story without that. But I think probably one of the key things was just I never try and just sit down and immediately start asking people a million questions and saying, tell me about how you're dying of lung disease, and tell me about how you got royally screwed in this system. Or, I certainly wouldn't sit down and say, will you sign this thing and give me your social? So I would just I learned a lot about mining and talk to them. People like to talk about their jobs, people like to talk about their lives, and they want to, if you kind of show that you're genuinely interested in that, I think that sort of breaks down the barrier of, there was some natural apprehension of the guys coming in from Washington, but of course it helps that I'm from Tennessee. But I think just listening to people and not pressing them immediately, and I think they sort of hopefully grew to trust me. I think many of them did.
I was wondering, you talked about databases, and I was curious whether you built that database by hand, and if you could talk about, what the fields look like, and what did you have in the database, and was it connected to did you try to connect it to anything else? And then I'm not completely clear on when you asked people to give you permission to look at their medical records, were those medical records all sort of held by the courts, or who had access to, for instance, the secret medical records that lawyers were keeping in Gary's case, for instance, that never came out in court?
Sure. I'll address your second one first and then rewind. Those are actually on file at the Labor Department, but you can't get them without this sort of permission form, and I did have some conversations with some people at the Labor Department.
So these are filings for medical compensation. This is why they were
Right,
in
yeah,
the
and
Labor
it all
Department.
goes through a government system now, even though it's typically paid by the mining company. And then the spreadsheet question. Whenever you build your own database, it's sort of an evolving process, and you inevitably realize partway through that you should have been recording something all along, and that the fields that you created that you thought were important were not the only ones that were important, and that actually you've probably been recording stuff that's completely useless as well. So there were lots of iterations of it, but it was basically just case number, person's name, date, whether they won or lost, and then what Dr. Wheeler read the x-ray as, and what the other doctor read the x-ray as. And that was, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that was basically it.
But that instead looking at how many hundreds or thousands of...
Yeah, there were about 3,400 individual films in about 1,500 cases.
Right. Yes, please.
What's the writing process in a story like this? You talked a lot about, the amazing sort of investigative work that you did, but the actual sort of putting the story together, like, this is my lead, this is where I'm going to tell everyone what happened. How do you start outlining that story, something as sort of big as this?
Yeah, it's a really long process. I love writing. That's how I got into journalism, actually, because I liked writing, and then realized I liked reporting too. So I have outlines, but they're really, really rough, and I just kind of, I don't know. I just start with some main things that I want to hit up high. Usually, I think any reporter will probably tell you that once you get the lead, or in this case, the top section worked out, everything kind of flows from there. But it's basically just figuring out how I can hit the key points that I want to make while also integrating humanity into it, so that I can basically say, reader, here's why you should be outraged at what's going on here. But also, this is, don't just stop here. This isn't everything. We're going to tell you the story, and come with me on a journey of 5,000, 7,000. The first story was 9,000 words, and I was amazed that people read that. So it's really sort of trying to convey both that you found some really interesting stuff, and I'm telling a story.
Yes, just one more question. The rest of you can ask questions at the end of the panel. That's also an incentive for you to stay on to the very end. Yes.
Thank you very much. In your introduction, I got the impression that the mine workers, the sick mine workers that you met, that they really did not have adequate legal representation. Do you think this is some kind of reflection on the legal profession? I'd like your comment on that. And can I just get a part two is, I believe that mine workers do have a union. And I wonder if you, in the course of your work, did you develop any insights into shortcomings among the advocacy that, or lack thereof, that their union was supposed to be doing for them? Thank you.
Yeah, so those two sort of go together, actually. The United Mine Workers have, they're really a shadow of what they used to be. Now they're, I mean, when they try, they can be powerful advocates for their miners, but there has been remarkable, frankly, union busting by coal companies in the last 15 to 20 years. And so they really, it used to be that the mine workers were able to help provide some representation in some of these cases. That is really rare. It doesn't really happen much in these cases. One of the main reasons, and this is one thing that the reform legislation seeks to address about access to counsel, is basically there are a handful of people who actually work on the miner side of this thing, and it's because these cases are very, very long and drawn out. You're fighting a giant mining company in most cases that has seemingly limitless resources to hire as many doctors and lawyers as they want. You usually are stuck with the sort of whatever evidence the miner is able to get from his free exam paid by the Labor Department. And then you are actually not, you're legally barred from charging the miner at all for your services until the claim is final, and that's after all appeals. And even then, you then have to file a petition to justify every penny of your legal fees, and the coal company will litigate that for a prolonged period of time. And so it really has driven advocates out of the system, and so that's a large reason why you have things like the withholding of evidence and not developing adequate medical evidence in a lot of cases, because there's really no one looking out for the miners in a lot of cases.
Thank you, Chris. You can ask more questions of Chris, including what it's like to work at BuzzFeed at the end of this panel.